Assalamualaikum dan salam sejahtera. Anda sedang menyaksikan Niaga AWANI bersama saya Rozman dan kita mulakan dengan laporan ini terlebih dahulu. Astro Malaysia Holdings Berhad mencatat pertumbuhan dalam perbelanjaan periklanan ADEX pada suku ketiga tahun kewangan 2025. Dalam tempoh itu, ADEX Astro meningkat 13%. Suku ke suku bernilai 80 juta ringgit dan mencerminkan kebolehupayaan syarikat penyiaran ini menyesuaikan diri dan terus memberikan nilai tambah kepada periklan dalam keadaan ekonomi semasa.
Walaupun ekonomi suram dan perbelanjaan pengguna berhati-hati, Astro mencatatkan pendapatan 750 juta ringgit, pendapatan sebelum faedah, cukai susut nilai dan pelunasan EBITDA 158 juta ringgit dan keuntungan selepas cukai dan kepentingan minoriti Patami ternormal 1 juta ringgit dengan aliran tunai bebas sebanyak 138 juta ringgit. Peningkatan ini didokong prestasi cemerlang Astro Radio yang menyumbang 40 juta ringgit ADEX syarikat dengan pertumbuhan sebanyak 24% suku ke suku sekaligus mengukuhkan kedudukannya sebagai rangkaian radio nombor 1 Malaysia seperti laporan bancaan bebas pendengar radio yang dilaksanakan oleh GFK baru-baru ini. Menurut kajian Radio Audience Measurement RAM with 2 2024 GFK yang diiktiraf industri, Astro Radio mencatat peningkatan capaian sebanyak 2% yang menjadikan jumlah capaiannya kepada 72%. Dapatan yang merentasi 16 stesen radio mengesahkan Astro terus mendahului lanskap Radio Malaysia dengan mengungguli tempat pertama dalam keempat-empat bahasa utama. Astro turut mencatatkan pencapaian dalam aspek penghasilan karya berdaya saing. Setakat ini, Astro mencatatkan kejayaan besar dengan filem Kaha, Kaplah High Council mencecah 10 juta ringgit sejak mula tayangan November lalu dan Don Dukun 5 juta ringgit serta program reality TV seperti TikTok, Gimme the Mic Malaysia dan musical Lawak Superstar 4 masing-masing meraih 5.1 juta penonton. Teledrama Andai Tiada Dia unggul muncul sebagai tontonan nombor 1 2024 selepas merekodkan 1.6 juta tontonan, manakala adaptasi Jepun Kelas Tahanan Cikgu Hiragi menarik jutaan tontonan membuktikan keunggulan Astro dalam adaptasi karya tempatan dan antarabangsa. Ketua Pegawai Eksekutif Kumpulan Astro Holdings Berhad, Wayne Smith berkata, rata-rata keluarga di seluruh negara sedang menghadapi pelbagai tekanan dihimpit kos sara hidup yang kian meningkat serta ketidaktentuan global yang mana sebahagiannya disebabkan perubahan dasar Amerika Syarikat yang menyukarkan perbelanjaan. Jelasnya, seumpama itu, Astro memperkenalkan Astro One, satu pakej hiburan baru yang diolah khas untuk mudahkan pilihan dan memberi nilai tambah kepada isi rumah di Malaysia.
Rancangan Malaysia ke-13 RMK ke-13 perlu dirancang serta dilaksanakan dengan sebaik mungkin bagi memastikan Malaysia mencapai status negara maju menjelang tempoh 2027 hingga 2029. Menteri Ekonomi Rafizi Ramli berkata mengikut unjuran dengan pertumbuhan serta kadar mata wang pada peringkat sekarang, Malaysia berupaya menjadi negara berpendapatan tinggi ukuran untuk menjadi negara maju seawal 2027.
Menurut Rafizi, pertumbuhan ekonomi mampan pada kadar 4 hingga 5% adalah penting bagi memastikan negara dapat mencapai status negara maju. Justru katanya Malaysia perlu mencipta enjin pertumbuhan baharu yang lebih dinamik agar negara dapat mengekalkan momentum pada kadar yang lebih tinggi.
I think dalam RMK 11 I think kita ada satu peluang. Sebenarnya kita juga ada peluang dalam RMK 12 ini, tapi ialah kita ada COVID dan sebagainya. Jadi the next wave, the next line itu kalau ikut unjuran dengan pertumbuhan yang sedia ada is 2027 and 2028 lah.
2029 memang boleh achieve lah kalau tak ada apa-apa.
Dia sebenarnya dia dinamik. Satu, dia bergantung kepada pertumbuhan ekonomi kita. Keduanya, dia juga bergantung kepada pertumbuhan ekonomi dunia.
Menurutnya, sesebuah negara mencapai status negara berpendapatan tinggi apabila mempunyai pendapatan negara kasar per kapita sebanyak $14,000 Amerika atau RM62,020. Sementara itu, Rafizi berkata Pulau Pinang penting dalam perancangan ekonomi negara, terutama dalam RMK 13 kerana negeri ini merupakan antara penyumbang ekspor terbesar negara, terutamanya daripada sektor elektrik dan elektronik. Selain itu, katanya Pulau Pinang juga kini memberi tumpuan terhadap pembangunan industri yang berasaskan kecerdasan buatan AI selari dengan hasrat kerajaan persekutuan untuk membina keseluruhan ekosistem sektor berkenaan. Tambahnya, tumpuan kerajaan dalam RMK 13 dan yang seterusnya adalah untuk memastikan rantaian nilai juga dibina bagi mewujudkan syarikat tempatan yang boleh mengambil bahagian dalam keseluruhan rantaian nilai itu.
Pelaburan diluluskan sebanyak RM254.7 bilion untuk 9 bulan pertama 2024 menekankan keyakinan kukuh pelabur terhadap dasar dan hala tuju ekonomi Malaysia. Menteri Pelaburan, Perdagangan dan Industri Tengku Datuk Seri Zafrul Abdul Aziz dalam satu kenyataan pada Rabu berkata pertumbuhan 10.7% tahun ke tahun dan penciptaan lebih 159,000 peluang pekerjaan menggambarkan rangka kerja strategik Malaysia dan usaha bersepadu kerajaan menarik pelaburan berimpak tinggi bagi pertumbuhan mampan.
Konsistensi dasar dan kebolehsuaian Malaysia menggalakkan pelabur melaksanakan komitmen jangka panjang dan melengkapkan negara dengan kapasiti mengemudi cabaran global yang sentiasa berubah dengan berkesan. Tambah beliau, fokus pihaknya melangkaui pencapaian sasaran pelaburan, meletakkan asas untuk ekonomi mampan dan inklusif yang akan memperkasakan semua rakyat Malaysia. Pada Selasa lepas, Perdana Menteri Datuk Seri Ibrahim mengumumkan Malaysia berjaya merekodkan jumlah pelaburan diluluskan sebanyak RM254.7 bilion dalam 9M 2024, membabitkan 4,753 projek ia dijangka menjana 159,347 peluang pekerjaan baharu. Ketua Pegawai Eksekutif Lembaga Pembangunan Pelaburan Malaysia MAIDA, Datuk Sik Samsul Ibrahim Sik Abdul Majid berkata, agensi itu komited memastikan pelaburan ini diterjemahkan kepada manfaat ekonomi ketara, peluang pekerjaan berkualiti dan kemakmuran jangka panjang. MAIDA menyaksikan nilai luar biasa daripada pelaburan diluluskan dalam 9 bulan pertama 2024, mencerminkan komitmen strategiknya membina ekonomi didorong inovasi berkembang maju. Pertumbuhan berterusan dalam pelaburan domestik menunjukkan keyakinan kukuh perniagaan tempatan terhadap ekosistem pelaburan Malaysia mantap. Memandangkan sudah menghampiri penghujung tahun, keutamaan MITI dan MAIDA kekal tertumpu kepada meningkatkan daya saing Malaysia dalam pasaran global sentiasa berkembang.
Tiada kemungkinan projek transit aliran ringan LRT laluan Mutiara Pulau Pinang dibatalkan walaupun terdapat pertukaran kerajaan di peringkat persekutuan. Menteri Ekonomi Rafizi Ramli berkata segala keputusan penting dibuat oleh kerajaan persekutuan buat masa ini dan segala proses telah dilalui supaya tender boleh diberikan secepat mungkin.
Saya tengok kepada perkembangan projek LRT Pulau Pinang ni, saya rasa kerajaan ini akan kekal sampai habis penggal dan menjelang habis penggal itu kontrak award semua dah berlaku. I think segala keputusan yang penting di peringkat kerajaan persekutuan telah dibuat. They are going through the process supaya kerja and award itu memang boleh proceed secepat mungkin.
Tambahnya, sesuatu projek infrastruktur mempunyai proses iaitu bermula dengan kelulusan dasar, bajet perolehan dan kemudian pemberian tender sebelum kerja-kerja bermula. Projek transit aliran ringan LRT Pulau Pinang tetap akan dilaksanakan meskipun kerajaan bertukar. Beliau berkata demikian pada sesi jawab program Madani mendengar sesi libat urus rancangan Malaysia ke-13 di Pusat Convention City Spice di Bayan Lepas pada Rabu.
Baik, kami akan terus kongsikan laporan ataupun data statistik terkini yang telah diterbitkan oleh Jabatan Perangkaan Malaysia mengenai prestasi bulanan perdagangan boron dan runcit setakat Oktober 2024. Dan kalau boleh saya perincikan mengenai data yang telah dikeluarkan oleh DOSM ini, kita melihat sektor perdagangan dan runcit telah merekodkan pada jumlah 150.1 bilion ringgit. Peningkatan sebanyak 5.5% berbanding bulan sebelumnya dan kita lihat sektor borong dan runcit ini Malaysia melakar rekod baharu pada bulan Oktober apabila mencatatkan nilai jualan ini dengan peningkatan lebih 5% berbanding tempoh yang sama tahun lalu. Dan kalau kita perincikan lebih lanjut mengenai indeks volume yang terbahagi kepada tiga sektor dan keseluruhan sektor perdagangan borong dan runcit. Kalau kita perincikan perdagangan borong runcit pada Oktober mencatatkan 159. Kalau dibandingkan dengan prestasi tahunan tahun lepas, bulan yang sama pada tahun 2022, ia mencatatkan sebanyak 152.2 bilion ringgit. Dan ini adalah perbandingan tahunan di mana kalau kita lihat perdagangan borong daripada tahun 2022 telah merekodkan sebanyak 138.3 bilion ringgit dan apabila masuk tahun seterusnya pada tahun 2023 ia telah meningkat kalau kita lihat prestasi ini kepada peningkatan berterusan di mana kalau kita saksikan di sini untuk kita memahami lebih lanjut bagaimanakah prestasi yang telah dikongsikan oleh Jabatan Perangkaan Malaysia di sini ini, kalau boleh kita tambah, Muhammad Uzi menambah sektor perdagangan borong dan runcit dilihat akan terus memainkan peranan penting dalam ekonomi Malaysia disokong oleh permintaan domestik yang kukuh dan juga persekitaran ekonomi yang menggalakkan. Dan kalau kita kembali balik kepada data ini, perdagangan runcit juga antara peningkatan yang paling tinggi berbanding borong dan runcit, di mana peningkatan sebanyak 5.0% kepada nilai jualan 182.0 bilion ringgit jumlah ini pada tahun Oktober 2023. Kenderaan motor juga meningkat berbanding Oktober tahun 2023 kepada Oktober 2024 meningkat 1.6% dalam tempoh setahun kepada 138 bilion ringgit. Dan ini adalah prestasi daripada segi indeks volume. Seterusnya untuk menyaksikan nilai jualan perdagangan borong dan runcit dan juga kenderaan bermotor, di sini nilai jualan setiap sektor perdagangan borong di sini kalau kita dapat saksikan bulan Oktober meningkat nilai jualan perdagangan borong pada 4.8%, namun prestasi daripada segi nilai jualan ia kepada 66.3 bilion ringgit. Sedikit peningkatan daripada September, walaupun ia meningkat daripada September, namun kita saksikan nilai jualan ia masih sedikit rendah. Manakala nilai jualan perdagangan runcit juga kalau kita saksikan daripada Julai sehinggalah Oktober ia mengalami peningkatan yang berterusan dalam nilai jualan perdagangan runcit yang telah meningkat 7.1% kepada 65 bilion ringgit. Manakala nilai jualan kenderaan bermotor juga telah meningkatkan peningkatan yang lebih stabil daripada Julai. Kita dapat saksikan peningkatan 2 digit, namun masuk Ogos, September, namun daripada 4 Julai hingga Oktober, daripada 4 bulan ini September saja yang mengalami penurunan yang telah merekodkan penurunan sebanyak 1.0%. Namun bulan Oktober, bulan seterusnya ia bangkit balik kepada nilai yang telah direkodkan 18.9 bilion ringgit dengan 2.7% kenaikan. Dan daripada kumpulan utama daripada segi nilai jualan perdagangan borong yang telah disokong ataupun disumbang paling tinggi daripada kumpulan utama, jualan borong, makanan, minuman dan juga tembakau yang telah merekodkan 8.9% sumbangannya kepada prestasi sektor borong. Manakala perdagangan runcit kita lihat paling tinggi telah disumbangkan oleh jualan runcit di kedai bukan pengkhususan mencatatkan sebanyak 8.5% sumbangan kumpulan utama kepada perdagangan runcit, manakala antara sumbangan yang tertinggi oleh kenderaan bermotor adalah daripada kumpulan utama jualan komponen dan aksesori kenderaan bermotor sebanyak 9.8%. Dengan apa yang telah dikatakan oleh Ketua Perangkaan Datuk Dr. Muhammad Uzi dengan sokongan berterusan daripada dasar kerajaan praktikal dan aktiviti perdagangan yang rancak, mereka telah menjagakan aliran menaik ini akan berterusan memacu pertumbuhan selanjutnya pada bulan-bulan yang mendatang. Walau bagaimanapun adalah penting untuk meneroka bersama pemimpin perniagaan, pemain industri tentang sejauh manakah pertumbuhan ini boleh dikekalkan untuk masa akan datang dengan ketidaktentuan global seperti inflasi dan gangguan rantaian bekalan. Dan kita akan bawakan perbincangan yang lebih mendalam dalam membantu untuk mengenal pasti strategi yang akan digunakan yang boleh dilaksanakan untuk memastikan momentum ini dapat dikekalkan sepanjang tahun termasuk selepas puncak musim perayaan. Izinkan saya berbahasa Inggeris untuk berbincang dengan tetamu selepas ini and to help us explore further business opportunities as we embrace this festive season and step into the new year with renewed hope, determination and strategies. The data reveals valuable insights into monthly trade performance and movement. As we look ahead, the focus shifts to effective businesses preparation and strategic planning to mitigate potential downside risks that could impact business performance. And for that, I welcome you, our guest, Datuk David Gurupatam, the co-founder of Industry Unite. I want to say thank you very much, Datuk, for joining me. Firstly, we already see the performance of trade, retail and wholesale for the monthly performance as of October 2024. And straight away, we want to take a look on the perspective of businesses and consumer confidence, with the retail trade growing by 7.1% and internet retail sales increased 5.1%. What do you see as the main drivers behind this consumer confidence, and how sustainable is this growth amid uncertainties like inflation and even the global economic shift? Please, David.
I think, thank you very much. It's actually a very good question. Firstly, I think it's very encouraging for SMEs. I think most of our members are pleased at the moment with the way the economy is doing. Now, the main thing I think is consumer demand, where you have had a sustained period of consumer demand across retail sales, in specialized stores, food and beverages, right? Non-specialized stores, rather, food and beverages. Now, what does that show? That shows that the specific targeted policies of the government post-COVID has been working. And I believe also that the economy these policies have renewed confidence in the consumer to go out and say, okay, we're past COVID, we've gone through that, we've got renewed hope. Government policies in the long term are doing well. Since we have reduced our dependence on subsidies, the economy is doing well, the ringgit is doing well. So this has an effect on obviously confidence, consumer confidence, and that translate into higher spending in retail and wholesale. Right. The second thing also, if you look at it in terms of the period of time, you're looking at that period of time in terms of seasonal festivals and events. So that has also, during that period also involves an increased tourist we have had increased tourist arrivals and festivals, holidays, and then we're in the school holiday period. So traditionally also this is tends to be a period where retail actually goes up. And so with all these factors in mind, I mean, obviously it's what is key is the sustained increase, not ad hoc, right? So it shows a good trend, a positive trend moving forward, as you have shown in your graph, Nina.
And Dato, as you mentioned that post-pandemic COVID-19, we can see a continuous recovery for a business sector and even within the business environment. And one of the biggest factors for the trade and wholesale performance on October 2024 is the seasonal boost. And seasonal factors like the Deepavali, school holidays and Agro Madani mega sales, which is by government initiative, clearly play a role in October's growth and all of other factors that you have just mentioned. And what strategies should businesses adopt to sustain momentum outside this peak periods, Dato?
I think if anything, it's shown us that the right marketing strategies or right incentives by the government in the right sectors at the right time has produced results. Okay, so the problem is that we know that during these high, during festivals and all that, we do well. It's the lagging period, is in between where we see a dip, or maybe it's not as good as we want to. So basically, I think one of the main things is that the government has got to look at an all year round program. You know, things like making sales events throughout the year. You know, and what I mean by that is in different sectors, create different events. The other thing is increasing our handouts to boost household income, to increase that specific spending. You know, for example, you see, you know, when you target, cash handouts or assistance to P40, they go out and they spend, and then that money circulates around in the economy. So I think by increasing the household income should be one of those targets that incentivize these people to go out and spend this money even during during those high festival periods and so on and so forth. The other thing is to also perhaps help giving by encouraging and giving grants to retailers to do more in terms of their marketing and their sales during these off-peak periods. I mean, those are policies that perhaps should be looked at by the government. And also, you know, at the end of the day, if you look at retail, it's actually a shopping experience. So how do we increase the shopping experience? To give you an example, like, you know, during the festivals, you have the shopping malls doing decorations. It enhances the shopping experience. So I think that perhaps one of those things could be to incentivize the shopping malls to have experiential activities, especially during non-peak period. And perhaps those are some of the ideas that the government can look into.
And we know that talking about promotion, not only it goes to online and e-commerce, but also including the products as well. And internet retail sales, as mentioned in the Dawson reports, continue to rise. But how well are traditional retail businesses adapting to digital transformation? Maybe you can share with us what role can industries like Unite, industry player, a business leader play in helping businesses navigate this transition?
I think the key is adoption. You know, there must be an incentive to adoption. So if you look at retail and the adoption of these so-called digitalization, is actually because it's been disruptive. When I say disruptive, meaning it's disrupted the traditional way of doing business. It's brought about efficiency in doing business. For example, I give you an example. A very simple example is perhaps McDonald's. You know, now you can go and press the button and then you just go and wait for your burger. You know, and payment is online and things like that. That's a very small way, and that from there it moves on to something bigger and more digitalization, more efficiency. So adoption is the key. The second part of it is actually the cost of these solutions. You know, a lot of these solutions, you know, they're coming down in costs. We are getting a lot of these solutions being now developed in the country as opposed to outside the country. So adoption of it is possible because the cost has come down. And I foresee that it will go down further with AI now playing a very big role in development of these type of solutions. The question now is, how do we get people to adopt? It is really how we incentivize that. Now, if you look at all the recent government plans and so on and so forth, digitalization is a very big part of it. A lot of grants, a lot of availability of grants and assistance and support if these companies start to do that. The other, of course, even for the retailers and the small retailers who are pretty perhaps traditional, is to try to understand and give a simple migration into the online world. So, for example, you know, whether you're selling a kain or tudung or anything, basically, if you can now adopt a online presence and you start with an online presence, then you have a digital system whereby you manage your inventory, you manage your sales. You know, this adoption, which is step by step, and this kind of adoption should be encouraged, or you know, at least these people should have access to knowledge on how this adoption will translate into a more efficient and more productive position in terms of sales.
And we can see that digital support is also been done by the government that has been put into initiative and even policies that has been put in place to support the sector's recovery and growth, especially post-pandemic. Maybe my last questions, entering 2025 with the new hope, new will, and even new strategies. Dato, are there any specific areas where businesses require additional intervention, such as financing or even tax incentives?
No, certainly. I think, you know, I mean, I for one, you know, I've been, where it's been good, I've always praised. Where it's been not so good, I've always criticized. But I think, you know, if you look at a lot of what we're seeing today, it may seem small, but they're all, you can see the results of policy. So if you say, oh, online sale, look, is improving our retailers. Now, why did that happen? That happened because the government rationalized it, whereby it's one of those things that Industries Unite brought up with the government before, which was we had a situation where people from sellers from outside Malaysia had a benefit over the local retailers because they didn't have to pay licensing fees and things like that. They could sell it cheaper in our market. And so the government came up with policies whereby there were certain taxes and there were certain restrictions, and that helped to. And we said if you do that, that will help the local retailers actually adopt online strategies and perhaps make more money doing that. Now, the government did that. The government actually made those policies happen maybe a year and a half ago, and you're seeing the results this year. So a lot of this and where this can move forward is a change in the mindset whereby the government and business have to communicate and have to have an understanding and have to work together so that we then have policies that translate into positives, which didn't used to be the case before. You know, before you had all these bureaucrats sit up there, they never run a business before and they're making policy for business. But now you can see when there's engagement post-COVID, when there are very targeted policies, we're actually seeing every sector one by one, we're seeing improvement. We talked about targeted subsidies, getting rid of blanket subsidies and things like that years ago, and we're seeing all these results now. So that's something that we need to do. We are very encouraged by this government. A lot of their policies. I'm very encouraged by the fact that the government is prepared to sit down and consult business leaders. I'm very encouraged by this government having long-term ideas of how we're going to move and shift and reduce our trade gap and try to boost incomes. Now when you have to understand something. Around the world, people are going through a cost of living crisis, and even in Malaysia, the cost of living has barang semua dah naik. But how is it you have retail spending? Now that's the magic of government policies, and so yes, I'm very encouraged by it. Industries Unite, SMEs are very encouraged by it, but I believe we can do more.
Again, I want to say thank you very much for this insightful discussion on how can we unpack the business growth gaps and unlock future opportunities. Again, I want to say thank you very much to Datuk David Gurupatam, co-founder of Industries Unite, and definitely all of our discussion here will be featured in AstroAwani.com and across all social media platforms. And don't go anywhere, Niaga Awani will be taking a short break and we'll be right back.
Bila kerja sendiri, semua kena buat sendiri. Tapi, bersama rakan niaga, semuanya dapat ditempuhi bersama.
Apa signifikan dengan pengumuman ataupun berita yang keluar dari media China ini berkaitan dengan hasrat Malaysia untuk menyertai gabungan BRICS?
Kita mau dapat lebih banyak umpamanya pelaburan daripada negara China.
Kalau melihat kepada Akta Kanak-Kanak 2001, adakah kita terlalu lambat untuk melihat proses untuk meminda akta sedia ada?
Kita perlu ada penyelarasan. Kita tak mahu bekerja secara silo.
All right, this segment will be focusing on property where heritage buildings are more than architectural relics that are tangible connections to our history, culture and identity. Yet as cities grow and space become a premium, the questions loom, should we preserve these treasures or redevelop them to meet modern demands? To help us understand better, ready on the line is Sulaiman Sahih, Director Research Rahim & Co International Disember. I want to say thank you very much, Rahim, for joining me. Firstly, talking about the heritage building, probably in our mind is also progress, or even we can say maintain the heritage. Firstly, what metrics should guide the decision between preserving and redeveloping a heritage building, and how do we weigh cultural significance against economic potential?
Firstly, thank you very much for this opportunity again. On heritage buildings, for us to determine what parameters in deciding the metrics, whether a property or a building should be conserved or preserved, we need to look at the philosophy of why such things are actually needed, or whether they are actually needed in the first place. Right now, more than ever, the society have evolved to be more appreciative of the little things in life, if you like. If you imagine how things were in the past in terms of how society moves and develops itself, at one time people are going towards modernization, building and development equates to physical development more than anything else. But now, in the past few decades, we see that the society, locally as well as internationally, people appreciate the hardware elements, the physical elements, as well as the software elements, the programming or the intrinsic values of what you get. From there, you can see that the elements such as quality of life, well-being, being relatable to your society, and the sense of identity is being appreciated more. With that, then we can appreciate how important heritage is, or significant buildings or sites are for within our society. With that, then the metrics are actually designed. So we actually look at the political aspect, the legal aspect, the economic viability of those redevelopment, cultural aspect, historical significance, all towards nation building and creation of a national identity or a communal or a community identity within a multicultural society. So with that, a site of significance is actually being has to go through the processes of identification and assessment of its historical significance and its heritage, going through Jabatan Warisan Negara, for example, or even the NGOs who are actually proposing them. Then it will be decided whether it is something that is heritage property or heritage building, which should be conserved or even preserved, or even it has to be given some leeway in terms of its execution of preserving, whether it can be enhanced, whether it relates to the national context or relates to the community context. And that's how we would actually create a matrix of assessment in terms of whether a property or a building or a site is actually worthy of being declared as a heritage site.
Quite interesting, as you mentioned earlier on our discussion on preserving or redeveloping a heritage building, where we take into context of balancing between the cultural significance and against economic potential, but you also said that people are also appreciating the hard and even soft elements. And in some cases where redevelopment is chosen, how can developers ensure the essence of the original heritage is not completely lost?
That's where the guidelines, as well as the National Heritage Act and all the state enactments, as well as the multiple guidelines and regulations or parameters are actually being delineated. And it needs to be delineated properly and clearly, where feedbacks are also being gathered from the community, so that you can actually balance whether to preserve or to redevelop. Some of the more commonly talked about heritage sites have been preserved or conserved, being used as a communal or community facilities or public facilities. Things like a museum, for example, or monuments. Those are more towards the benefit of the public at large. But in terms of redevelopment, this is where some areas that are being heritage buildings are being redeveloped or intended to be redeveloped because it's owned by private entities or private owners. For them to actually conserve or preserve, there's cost implication as well. And making sure that such endeavors are being carried out would actually cost them money. So that's why the programs where the government grants are actually being introduced, even through the master plans, even within the national budget also it has been emphasized that heritage preservation is actually being allocated with certain funds. We actually have Malacca and Penang, UNESCO heritage sites. So the development within these areas has to balance between the needs of development per se for commercial viability, vibrancy, and moving forward, as well as the preservation of the character of the site. The benefit of preserving is not entirely non-financial benefit. There is actually financial benefit as well. Things that are being developed with historical significance can be turned into a strong tourist attraction, which then generates more multiplier effect in terms of the economic vibrancy of an area, for F&B outlets, for the kind of activities that would actually spur economic growth in an area. So in order to balance between whether to preserve or conserve against redevelopment, it needs to be looked at holistically, whereby the redevelopment of a city would actually move forward with both the physical development of the buildings as well as the conservation of the heritage in this particular site. But the mechanization or the implementation of that can be segregated out. That's where you can actually see certain developments. There's mechanism like transfer of development rights, getting incentives, tax incentives for development, as well as grants and support in executing these kind of developments.
There's a lot of consideration that we have to take a look at and have a deep further on this. And probably about the implication that you mentioned, what are the long-term economy implications of prioritizing preservations over redevelopment, particularly in high-density urban areas?
In any city, we do need to, and the market has started to appreciate open spaces, well-being. Because if we look at the notion of a good city that would actually serve its community and its citizens, it is towards creating an environment that upholds the well-being of the inhabitants. So when we actually balance the developments for this kind of conservation or redevelopment, the areas that can be preserved might have a low density, yes. But this low density does not mean that it doesn't have benefits to the society. The creation of these idiosyncratic or unique experiences would actually give a better sense of community and also for the benefits of the future generations. And this can continue on with the development that can be reallocated in other places. So in terms of town planning and zoning, that becomes a critical point in terms of the overall master plan of a balanced city development.
And we can say, how can policymakers ensure a balanced approach to heritage preservations when faced with pressure from both cultural advocates and even developers?
We need to appreciate all the stakeholders' different angles and interests. And in making such preservation or heritage conservation for certain areas, it is good for the community, yes. But in terms of how do we fund such a development? So the interest of the developers who will actually be looking at how do we actually conserve or make sure that these areas are actually maintained as a heritage site for all the benefits that it actually gives. But it must make commercial sense for the developers because they are actually in the business of property development. That's where the collaboration, the engagement between the different interested parties, giving all angles, as well as strong government support. Strong government support in terms of allowing for initiatives and incentives or even certain grants that are actually given. Grants that are actually given right now are mostly on repairing works, restoring works. These would actually make sure those heritage buildings are actually taken care of. It doesn't deteriorate further. It will still be enjoyed by the communities of the future. Yes. But how do we fund those developments? And that's where the balance with the redevelopment, when the redevelopment rights that has some commercial sense, would actually make it a win-win partnership. But at the same time, the guideline in terms of how those are to be executed must be cast in a very transparent and effective manner. Because if not, the redevelopment could have just to maintain a particular facade, but the rest of the content is all lost. There's certain developments where you can actually preserve more than just the facade. You can actually preserve certain sections. Of course, technology comes into play over here because in certain areas, in certain globally, people do actually look at literally pulling up a particular house and relocate at another location. And the building is actually, the redevelopment is done surrounding or enveloping that particular building, having that architectural significance or historic feature in the center as a central focus point for the new development.
All right, again, I want to say thank you very much to Sulaiman Sahir, Director of Research, Rahim & Co International, Stadium Berhad. As we can see from early of the end of the discussion, talking about the heritage building, it's either preserve or progress. Definitely, all the approach that Malaysia needs to be very careful and holistically talking about preservation of heritage. Again, I will say thank you very much, Sulaiman Sahir, and definitely all of our discussion here will be featured in astroawani.com. And right up next, with our colleagues Ibrahim, Sani, will be taking over the next segment, and Niaga Awani will be taking a short break as well, and we'll be right back.
Nak coklat? Hari ni tak boleh. Nanti saya kena dengan mak saya. Pepsodent baharu disahkan halal. Microkalsium aktif dan Proflorida Complex membantu memperbaiki lubang halus akibat makanan manis sebelum menjadi kaviti untuk pelindungan maksimum. Pepsodent.
Hasil karya anak tempatan yang berbeza.
Kita kancil yang boleh jadi malas juga sepanjang zaman lah.
Ini adalah karya agung.
Kancil, kisah lama berwajah baru.
University Malaya UM is expected to offer a cardiothoracic specialist training course this October.
There will be no U-turn on the implementation of the Vehicle Entry Permit VEP for all foreign vehicles entering Malaysia from Singapore.
Diesel sales at petrol stations have decreased by 30% within the first week of the fuel subsidy rationalisation on June 10th.
Thanks for joining us. My name is Ibrahim. Sani. I'm currently at the British High Commission here in Kuala Lumpur, joining the Right Honourable Secretary of State for Scotland, the MP Ian Murray. Minister, thank you very much for being the first UK minister under the new administration to come and visit us. Let's walk through with some of the areas of concern and some of the areas of interest that you have while you're here in Kuala Lumpur.
Well, it's great to be here. This is my first international visit as the Secretary of State, and the new government has been very keen to reset international relationships, and coming out here to Malaysia has been a great opportunity because of the long history, but also the great opportunities in the future for both of our countries working together.
And of course, you have met some of the members of our administration, including the Minister of Economy, Rafizi. What would be the areas of discussion that you could share with us when you met him?
Yes, well, I mean, it just shows the breadth of opportunities. So we talked a little bit about CPTPP and the UK joining that formally next month. We spoke about health, and we spoke about some of the partnerships that we have there, both long-term and the opportunities for the future. Energy is a huge issue that both countries are working on. Education, of course. We have 12,000 Malaysian students in the UK, many of which 12% or so are in Scotland, are ancient universities in Scotland. And we discussed some of those opportunities about investment both in the UK and here in Malaysia. So it was a wide-ranging discussion about our economy. What I wanted to find out, of course, is the biggest mission of the new UK Labour government is to create economic growth in the United Kingdom, and some of the growth figures out here in Malaysia, 5.3% last year, was significant. So I wanted to find out how he did that and how we can perhaps replicate some of that growth in the UK's perspective.
Of course, I don't think it's attributable to one person or one ministry. It's generally an effort, and of course, the moment of the year or the moment of the period, that's why we can enjoy that kind of growth. But this is, of course, on the back of a strong long-term relationship that Malaysia has with the UK. Let's dissect one by one, starting with education. 12,000 students in the UK, 12% in Scotland, ancient universities like St Andrews and Aberdeen and Dundee and more. This is not going to stop, I suppose. The trend is ever increasing. I have a university-going child as well, and she is having a trajectory towards the UK. This is a very common story that we've heard from across the nation. Do you feel that there could be other areas of improvements or growth that we can examine to get more numbers in the UK?
Well, it's hugely important because the educational exchanges and having that educational exchanges is historic, but it's also what gives the opportunities of the future. I don't think there's anybody I've met here yet in Malaysia over the last day or so that haven't actually had a connection directly with education in the United Kingdom or indirectly, and I hope that your daughter does decide to go. I could highly recommend Edinburgh as the other ancient university in the Scottish context. But that's really important, not just for the economies now, but for the economies and relationships and partnerships in the future. There is no doubt that that's had huge implications. We had the 40th anniversary celebrating of the Chevening alumni yesterday in Malaysia, and that's a huge programme with 2,000 alumni now who've had those cultural exchanges. We've signed an agreement this morning between the Royal College of Surgeons of Edinburgh and the UM and UKM universities here in Malaysia for surgical relationships and exchanges, and in fact one of the first surgical fellowships from there will go to St Mary's next year. So it's really, really important because it's not just about education, it's not just about sharing ideas, but it's also about the future. And many of the leaders across the world, but certainly within your own government, have been in education in the United Kingdom and have that partnership. So if we want to grow our economies, if we want to grow our friendship, grow our partnerships, build on our history, but look to the future, then education is one of the key things that unlocks that, and we're very keen to try and pursue those opportunities.
I would like to also argue that despite some political premium that can be associated to both the UK and Malaysia for that matter, education seems to be insulated from this moment because generally speaking, people just want the education experience and of course the experience of university life. The political premium might not necessarily also be attributed to this kind of environment. Do you feel that that is still the case right now? And on top of that, do you feel that the political premium in the UK is actually dissipating, considering that the Prime Minister Keir Starmer is, of course, stabilising things domestically there? Yes, absolutely, and we want to be very welcoming to students to come. You know, the history is very clear for everyone to see, but actually it's about the opportunities of the future we need to exploit. In the Scottish context, which obviously I'm very passionate about, we have some of the oldest and best universities in the world that can give a great educational experience to Malaysian students, and we should continue to welcome students into Scotland and the rest of the UK higher education sector. But this is one of the key trading things, because education is a massive trading commodity, and sharing students and sharing that knowledge base across both countries is hugely important. And the Prime Minister is very clear that the future of our economy depends on having the very best talents at the very best universities, and we can offer that. One last question before we go into the break. There's a lot of universities in Malaysia that offer plenty of twinning programs and foundation programs. Do you feel that it is oversaturated in Malaysia when it comes to some of the collaboration that we see from local universities and local colleges with their direct counterparties here, there in the UK? Well, we have campuses here too. I'm visiting the Heriot Watt campus, which is headquartered, of course, and based in Edinburgh, on my visit here to Malaysia. So it's really important that there's also campuses based here. It's a beautiful campus. It's a great campus, yes. and some of the work they're doing jointly with the Malaysian universities and the students here is fantastic. So there's not just about the student exchange, but actually there are campuses, UK campuses here, based in Malaysia, doing work on the ground here as well. So I don't think you can have any type of saturation when it comes to education. It's what unlocks our economy, it's what unlocks our opportunities, it's what means that we can deal with poverty and some of the big issues we have in the United Kingdom in terms of our structure of the economy. So education and investment in education is key to that economically, but it's also key to those relationships between two countries. And I think it's something we should nurture, we should cherish, and we should use the history that we have together in education to build some of those opportunities for the future. Fantastic. We'll go for one short break. When we come back, we'll continue our discussion with the Secretary of State of Scotland.
This month on TVN, Gen Z celebrities from the city embrace rural life with their unique take on enjoying the countryside in a Gen Z way. The cast travels across South Korea to discover unique culture, nature, and fascinating people. For actors will leave their urban lives behind to experience the serene and picturesque rural life in Finland. This month, stay tuned to TVN.
I dah sampai Tokyo bersama dengan kawan-kawan saya.
4 selebriti dengan misi.
Something big is going on.
I dah bersedia untuk meniaga. Selamat datang ke dunia saya.
Ni belum mengangkat lagi ni, dia dah berlari. Menggabungkan budaya dan rasa di Jepun.
Nihongo gambatte hoshii.
Ada subtitle.
Buka kedai now in Tokyo, Jumaat di Astro Prima dan Astro Go.
Thanks for staying on with us. I have with me the Right Honourable Ian Murray, the Scottish Secretary of State. Minister Murray, let's talk a little bit more about the CPTPP and the developments that we've seen over the past few years. The last time I was here in this office, I think it was last year, the UK has just signed an agreement confirming the level of engagement that the UK will be joining the CPTPP. What has been some of the developments that you can share with us today?
Well, the UK will join formally and ratify on the 15th of December and become a full member of the CPTPP, and we're hugely excited about the opportunities that this provides. In the Scottish context, we have goods and services that will benefit hugely from CPTPP, whether it be in food and drink, and of course being a Scot whisky is one of my great passions, and of course that's part of the CPTPP that will benefit hugely from it, but our goods and services are also part of that. And I think it just shows a direction of travel that countries have to work very closely together. Trading blocs have to work very closely together, and CPTPP provides us with that access to those markets in this part of the world, which is hugely important for our traders, but also Malaysian traders as well.
There will be some of the points of contentions that we have to iron out, I suppose, palm oil being one of them. Other trading regional blocs such as APEC, for instance, and of course ASEAN. Do you feel that CPTPP is still seen as a major focus for countries like the UK and Malaysia to think about, because there's so many other regional blocs and trade blocs that could provide some form of incentives for some of the countries to, I guess, deep dive into, and less on, say, for instance, CPTPP?
Well, I mean, trading across the world is hugely important to the United Kingdom. It's something that we're keen to exploit, and all the arguments about leaving the European Union are there for all to see, but actually one of the big opportunities that comes from that is being an outward-looking trading nation as an independent trading nation, and looking towards other blocs and other trading blocs to be able to increase our own economic output as well as those relationships across the globe. So it's really important that trade will always be complicated, because everyone has their own competing trading policy, but also they have their own goods and services that they want to champion. But I think the really important thing that comes from CPTPP is the UK being an outward-looking nation, resetting those relationships with the international community, showing that we can put together mutually beneficial trading deals that are helpful to our economy and our people, but also to those other countries that are involved in the trading blocs as well. So it's really, really important that we see that ratified on the 15th of December. And everyone in this office is very, very excited about it. And everyone that we've spoken to on this trip to Malaysia is very excited about the UK's accession to CPTPP in December. So we're looking forward to it.
Speaking about the European Union, do you feel that under Keir Starmer a lot more can be done when it comes to establishing trade relations, political relations with the European Union, considering that this is a fresh slate, I suppose? Labour was voted in quite overwhelmingly. Do you feel that this is the moment of change for restarting and re-establishing relations with the European Union?
Yes, I mean, it's a moment of change for re-establishing relationship with the European Union and the rest of the world. There is no doubt the previous government damaged our relations with the international community, and this is a real moment of reset with the European Union. It is our biggest trading partner, individually and collectively. Many of the issues that we have in terms of our economy, trading goods and services, the movement of people, protection of borders, security, particularly with the Russia-Ukraine issues at the moment as well, are all dependent on the UK working very, very closely with our European Union partners, but also our European nation partners as well. So that resetting of the relationship is clear for people to see, and something that we have to work very hard on to make sure that we can get the benefits both for the UK and for the rest of the European Union.
I'd be remiss if I didn't mention him, but in the days after Trump won the election in America, and witnessing the BBC World Service airing the PMQ, it was a pretty tough moment for your Prime Minister to deal with the questions. Is it going to be difficult re-establishing ties with your American counterparts now that President Trump is going to be back at the White House January onwards?
Well, I mean, the UK has a long-lasting special relationship with America. That special relationship does not change, whoever is the incumbent of the White House. It's perfectly up for the people of America to elect their own elected members and their president, as it is for any other country in the world, but it's also incumbent on us as a government to work with whoever is the office holder, the great office holder of President of the United States, and so that special relationship will endure. Of course, President Trump's mother was from the Isle of Lewis in Scotland, so he has a very strong Scottish connection. He owns golf courses in Scotland as well, so
the former I know, I didn't know, the latter I know. It's a bit interesting that there's some Scottish heritage there.
But I think it's really important for all governments to work with whoever is in the White House, because America is no doubt the economic driver of the world. The old adage that if America sneezes, the rest of the world economy catches a cold is perfectly true today as it has been over history. So really important to develop those relationships. The Prime Minister and the Foreign Secretary has met previously with President Trump before the election, had a very constructive discussion
when he was still campaigning.
Still campaigning, and those constructive discussions will continue to happen throughout the transition and indeed into the new presidency. So these relationships are much more played out, of course, on the media, as you would see, but the personal relationships and those ties between both countries are incredibly strong, and some of the common challenges, whether it be in defence and security, economic or otherwise, are there for all to see, and those can only be resolved by countries working together.
But would it also be an opportunity for you to seek out better trade relations with other great nations in China, with the EU, some of the many countries in Africa, for instance, and of course Asia? Are you then still emboldened to entreat with the Americans, considering that they might have inward-looking policy under Trump over the next 4 years? Wouldn't this be the best opportunity to go abroad?
Yeah, I don't think it's an either-or. I think you need to do both. We can't control internal economic or trade policy with America, and therefore we have to make the case for the United Kingdom and for our own views on trade and the economy. So we can't control what would happen internally in America or decisions the President make, but you do both. We want to make sure that we have a very strong economic and other relationship with the United States, but also with the rest of the world. The CPTPP being a key part of that, of course, the resetting of the relationship with the European Union and closer economic and cultural ties there with the renegotiation or in terms of the agreement we have with the European Union happening next year. So all of these things have to be done at the same time, and of course the #1 mission of this new government in the United Kingdom is economic growth. We can only have that economic growth by inward investment, by growing our own economy, and by making sure that we can work with others. And that doesn't mean that we choose one over the other. It means that we try and do everything that we possibly can, both with America and other countries around the world, which is why we're here in Malaysia, actually, because the opportunities between both nations are considerable, mutually beneficial for both nations, and actually we're very, very excited about continuing those and developing those relationships into the future.
Before we conclude our conversation, I would like to tap a little bit in terms of your views when it comes to federalism in Malaysia. We've seen how the states of Sabah and Sarawak are demanding more. You've had this experience when it comes to the Scottish independence. You voted against it. You wanted to be in the federation, I suppose. Is it a federation or is it a country of countries? I'm not too sure.
Well, yes, it's a country. It's not a federation. It's a country of 4 countries coming together under the United Kingdom.
Would you see countries, or in our case, federation, becoming stronger together? Or do you feel that states do have, at least in our case, states do have greater say and greater rights, or required to be given greater rights moving forward? Do you feel that the whole idea of a federation is still here to stay, or breakaway regions is better and then comes together again in a form of, say, trade blocks and stuff like that?
Well, given my experience of the Scottish landscape and the constitutional elements of the United Kingdom. I would never dare to tread on someone else's constitutional arrangements in terms of commenting on that. But just generally, I'm a great believer in devolution and a great believer in subsidiarity. I do feel some of the political arguments around federalisation or otherwise become wrapped up in political arguments rather than about what is in the best interests of the public. In the UK environment, we have 4 nations that come together. Each of them have a different devolution settlement with different powers. Scotland is most advanced, but you have Wales and Northern Ireland at the same time. And of course, within England, some of those major regions around Merseyside or Greater Manchester or London have their own moralities that are increasingly having more powers, because the best place to make decisions is at the local level within the context of the United Kingdom. So devolution is never easy, because different decisions are made. There will always be elements from lesser devolution to more devolution, or less federalisation to more federalisation, but I'm a great believer in making sure that people should make decisions closer to where they live, and that's the best way to get best policy for the people that we seek to represent. In the United Kingdom at the moment, do we have devolution correct? Does it throw up challenges? Of course it does, but I think we've got a relatively stable settlement at the moment that means that we can have the best of both worlds in the Scottish context of a very strong Scottish Parliament with strong powers, but also under the umbrella of the United Kingdom.
What would be some of the risks that you are concerned about when it comes to domestic policies in the UK and perhaps the global scene as well?
Yes, well, the headwinds are strong. They're strong for the rest of the world as well. Economically, it's very difficult in the United Kingdom. We've had a significant budget deficit to have to deal with coming into as the new government.
So do we.
Yeah,
right,
in terms of the worst possible inheritance that we could have had since the Second World War is what we knew about, but also on top of that there was stuff that we didn't know about in terms of our public finances. So that's had to be dealt with, which is hugely politically difficult, but also difficult for the country. The budget was passed at the end of October, which sets the tone hopefully for the rest of this Parliament. So those are great challenges, but the international challenges are very clear that have been hugely economically disadvantaged to the United Kingdom. So the war in Ukraine, issues in the Middle East, instability of other countries in terms of political instability. And one of the key things I think that the United Kingdom can offer the world at the moment is a very, very strong political settlement, a very, very strong and stable government, and a very, very strong and stable parliament. And that was the result of the election that we had back in July.
Final question, Minister. Do you feel that the relationship between the UK and Malaysia is on the right direction, or are there great areas of improvements that can be worked on even further?
Well, I'm really excited about the opportunities that we can work on together, and there's huge amounts of potential to be able to do so. The Economy Minister yesterday and I had a long discussion about some of those wonderful opportunities across a whole host of sectors, so I think there's a lot more to do. That puts a lot of pressure on the High Commission here, of course, to be able to help us deliver some of that. But working in partnership, the ties between both countries are very strong. Those bonds and those relationships are incredibly strong. The history is there for all to see in terms of the development of those bonds. But I'm really excited about the future and hopefully working together. And my visit here is part of that, to develop those relationships, to see what the opportunities are for both our countries and to try and develop those. And we'll look forward to the future, and hopefully there'll be some bilaterals between our leaders shortly that can be able to cement those relationships and take some of those opportunities forward.
Thank you very much, Minister. That was the Right Honourable Ian Murray, the Scottish Secretary of State. If you want to learn more about interviews like this or conversations like this, just head on to astroawani.com and find out more there, or you can search for my show, The Economy, with Ibrahim, Sani. Until then, thanks very much for joining us. Catch you in the next one.
Malaysia sebenarnya berada di kedudukan kedua terburuk di dunia berkaitan keseimbangan hidup dan kerja.
LRT3 sudah akan mula beroperasi suku ketiga 2025. Kerja-kerja fizikal dan penstrukturan sudah mencecah 95%.
KPM sebenarnya sedang memperincikan cadangan untuk menyediakan allowance kos sara hidup tingkatan 6.
Libat urus antara
tindakan telah dan sedang diambil oleh Koskop, antaranya seperti berikut. Pertama, membangunkan dokumen dasar franchise negara 2030 yang akan dibentangkan dalam mesyuarat Jemaah Menteri besok. DFN 2030 merupakan satu dasar yang bersifat komprehensif dan holistik bagi membangunkan ekosistem franchise yang berdaya maju dan mampan melalui transformasi dan pengukuhan jenama franchise tempatan serta kecakapan tadbir urus. Ia merangkumi 5 teras utama seperti menambah baik polisi dan tadbir urus, mempromosi franchise sebagai model perniagaan pilihan, memantapkan kapasiti dan keupayaan usahawan franchise, mengoptimum capaian bantuan kewangan kepada usahawan franchise dan meningkatkan akses kepada pasaran domestik dan antarabangsa. Yang kedua, melaksanakan inisiatif pemutihan data franchise selaras dengan pindahan Akta Franchise 1998 pindahan tahun 2022 di bawah Section 10A yang menetapkan pembaharuan pendaftaran franchise setiap 5 tahun. Penetapan pembaharuan pendaftaran ini secara tidak langsung dapat membantu kementerian dalam mengawal selia perkembangan perniagaan franchise di negara ini dengan lebih berkesan. Ketiga, meningkatkan promosi franchise tempatan di peringkat antarabangsa melalui program Enhanced Franchise Development Program EFDP. Pada tahun 2025 sebanyak 2,7 juta ringgit diperuntukkan bagi program EFDP yang akan melibatkan penyertaan dalam pameran franchise antarabangsa, padanan perniagaan, bayaran balik kos ekspor, untuk pendaftaran intellectual property IP di luar negara dan latihan persediaan bagi pengembangan perniagaan usahawan franchise ke peringkat antarabangsa. Dan yang keempat, mengadakan kerjasama strategik dengan Persatuan Franchise Malaysia MFA yang merupakan ahli Asia Pacific Franchise Confederation dan World Franchise Council dalam meningkatkan kebeli pasaran jenama franchise Malaysia di peringkat global. Pada tahun 2024 ini, Malaysia telah dipilih sebagai tuan rumah bagi kali kedua untuk mempengerusikan mesyuarat tahunan EPFC dan WFC yang telah diadakan pada 27 hingga 29 Mei tahun ini di Kuala Lumpur bersempena dengan penganjuran pameran dan persidangan franchise antarabangsa Malaysia. Sebagai pengerusi mesyuarat tahunan ini, Malaysia berpeluang mengetengahkan franchise tempatan kepada wakil daripada lebih 30 buah negara yang memberi peluang kepada Malaysia untuk mengetuai perbincangan berkaitan dasar, standard, peluang kerjasama dalam industri franchise di peringkat antarabangsa. Terima kasih.
Pentung. Terima kasih Yang Berhormat Menteri. Terima kasih di atas jawapan yang sangat komprehensif dan juga kalau kita lihat dan dengar tadi banyak sebenarnya program-program yang dianjurkan, yang disediakan untuk usahawan-usahawan kita. Jadi soalan saya, selari dengan usaha untuk mengantarabangsakan usahawan PKS termasuk usahawan franchise, apakah perancangan KUSKOP dalam merencanakan penglibatan usahawan sektor franchise ini di peringkat global? Dan setakat ini berapa banyakkah usahawan franchise tempatan yang telah berjaya menebusi pasaran global ini? Terima kasih.
Terima kasih Yang Berhormat Bentung. Sebagai makluman dan seperti mana saya nyatakan dalam jawapan awal tadi, kementerian saya, KUSKOP, sentiasa komited untuk memperkasakan sektor franchise Malaysia di peringkat antarabangsa bagi menyokong agenda globalisasi dan meningkatkan sumbangan usahawan franchise kepada ekonomi negara. Perancangan KUSKOP dalam merencana penglibatan usahawan sektor franchise di peringkat global adalah melalui program Enhanced Franchise Development Program EFDP yang saya sebutkan tadi. Program ini adalah program KUSKOP dengan kerjasama pihak Persatuan Franchise Malaysia MFA yang mewakili pemain-pemain industri franchise negara kita. Antara langkah dan perancangan yang kita akan laksanakan pada tahun hadapan adalah misi perdagangan dan pameran franchise antarabangsa, peningkatan kapasiti dan keupayaan franchisor, program padanan perniagaan, kerjasama strategik dan rangkaian global dan tuntutan kos ekspor. Bagi tahun 2025, sebanyak 8 program promosi franchise antarabangsa telah dirancang dengan sasaran sebanyak 980 juta potensi pelaburan. Usaha-usaha ini adalah sebahagian daripada strategi KUSKOP untuk menjadikan sektor franchise sebagai salah satu penyumbang utama kepada ekonomi negara kita serta mendukung agenda untuk menjadikan Malaysia sebagai hub franchise di peringkat rantau dan antarabangsa. Dan sebagai makluman yang berhormat, bagi tahun ini kita telah melaksanakan 9 misi perdagangan di bawah program AFDP ini, melibatkan usahawan-usahawan franchise tempatan dan telah menjanah potensi pelaburan sebanyak 992 juta ringgit. Terima kasih.
Sungai Besar.
Terima kasih. Timbalan Dipertua, saya nak ucap tahniah kepada Pernas, terutamanya Kuskop yang menjadi pengurusi mesyuarat tahunan Asia Pacific Franchisee Confederation dan World Franchisee Council. Dari jawapan yang Menteri, saya kira inisiatif pengantarbangsaan yang dilaksanakan dapat membantu usahawan franchisee kita meningkatkan peluang perniagaan mereka. Jadi soalan saya yang berhormat, dalam mengantarabangsakan franchise ini, apa peluang dan potensi besar untuk usahawan franchise kita perolehi? Maksudnya sama ada peluang dan potensi dalam bentuk perjanjian perniagaan ataupun potensi dalam bentuk rakan perniagaan, sama ada yang kita bawa keluar ataupun kita bawa masuk ke dalam negara kita. Terima kasih.
Terima kasih. Yang berhormat, seperti mana saya nyatakan tadi, berdasarkan kepada misi yang telah kita laksanakan pada tahun ini sahaja, di mana sebanyak 9 misi perdagangan di bawah program AFDP ini telah menjanah 992 juta potensi pelaburan. Artinya sudah ada potensi kerjasama di antara usahawan franchisee kita dengan rakan niaga mereka di host countries, di mana kita telah mengambil bahagian di dalam pameran-pameran ataupun expo franchise. Begitu juga dengan kemungkinan usahawan tempatan itu membawa jenamah daripada negara lain ke negara kita. Tetapi di bawah program EFDP ini kita memberi fokus jenama negara kita yang dimiliki, dibangunkan oleh usahawan tempatan itu untuk menembusi pasaran negara-negara yang telah kita ambil bahagian 9 tahun ini, dan kita akan teruskan pada tahun hadapan. Saya sendiri memantau dan sentiasa mendapatkan taklimat daripada kementerian bahagian franchise kita dengan Pernas, susulan daripada misi-misi yang telah kita sertai ini. Besok saya akan bentangkan satu nota kepada Kabinet untuk memaklumkan kejayaan kita ini, dan selepas diterima oleh Jemaah Menteri, saya akan kongsikan dengan yang berhormat. Terima kasih.
Soalan tambahan.
Datuk Haji Idris bin Haji Ahmad Bagan Serai.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh dan salam sejahtera. Terima kasih kepada Timbalan Speaker, terima kasih kepada Menteri. Saya meminta Menteri Pertanian dan Keterjaminan Makanan menyatakan apakah mekanisme pengagihan bantuan yang dirancang oleh Kementerian untuk memastikan petani yang terjejas akibat banjir benar-benar mendapat bantuan tanpa penangguhan, dan bagaimanakah pihak kerajaan menangani isu kemungkinan ketirisan atau ketidakadilan dalam proses pemberian bantuan. Terima kasih.
Terima kasih, Tuan Speaker. Terima kasih kepada Bagan Serai yang bertanya. Kementerian Pertanian dan Keterjaminan Makanan prihatin terhadap petani yang terkesan akibat bencana banjir. KPKM telah menyediakan mekanisme bantuan, iaitu tabung bencana tanaman padi bagi pesawah padi dan tabung bencana pertanian bagi pengusaha tanaman selain padi. Selain itu, KPKM juga telah memperkenalkan skim takaful tanaman padi yang mula dilaksanakan sejak 13 September 2024. Skim takaful ini melindungi tanaman padi daripada pelbagai risiko, termasuklah bencana banjir. Bagi tabung bencana tanaman padi, bantuan ini diberikan secara tunai khusus kepada pesawah yang mengalami kerugian akibat bencana alam. Mekanisme ini melibatkan beberapa peringkat penilaian meliputi penyediaan laporan dan penilaian kerugian oleh agensi di lapangan bagi mengenal pasti tahap kerosakan yang dihadapi oleh pesawah. Seterusnya, laporan lengkap akan dibentangkan dan dinilai oleh Jawatankuasa Teknikal peringkat negeri dan Jawatankuasa Induk di peringkat KPKM. Bagi menangani isu kemungkinan berlaku ketirisan atau ketidakadilan dalam proses pemberian bantuan, sebagai makluman, bantuan pesawah hanya diberi kepada pesawah yang berdaftar dan telah melepasi Jawatankuasa Penapis di peringkat agensi teknikal. Seterusnya, semua permohonan bantuan akan dinilai dengan teliti dan disahkan oleh Jawatankuasa di peringkat negeri sebelum dibentangkan kepada Jawatankuasa Teknikal di peringkat ibu pejabat. Permohonan juga perlu disertakan dokumen yang lengkap sebelum dibawa untuk penilaian dan perakuan kepada Jawatankuasa Induk CPTPP di KPKM. Untuk tabung bencana pertanian, bagi permohonan bencana banjir, siasatan dan bancian di lapangan akan bermula dalam tempoh 14 hari selepas banjir, selesai untuk tujuan menilai tahap kerosakan terhadap tanaman. Proses bancian dan siasatan yang dijalankan oleh jabatan dan agensi bagi sesuatu kawasan yang terjejas adalah dalam tempoh 30 hari. Walau bagaimanapun, proses bancian dan siasatan perlu dijalankan dengan teliti bagi memastikan semua penerima bantuan adalah golongan sasar yang memerlukan dan mengelakkan ketirisan serta penyalahgunaan bantuan tersebut. Tabung bencana pertanian adalah projek agro makanan meliputi tanaman, komoditi bernilai tinggi, ternakan veterina, ternakan aquaculture, hasil-hasil perikanan, industri makanan dan dasar tani juga. Projek yang bukan berbentuk agro makanan sepenuhnya, iaitu agro pelancongan. Ini bantuan di bawah tabung bencana pertanian. Penilaian bantuan di bawah tabung ini akan ditentukan oleh Jawatankuasa Teknikal dan diluluskan oleh Jawatankuasa Induk untuk peruntukan bantuan berbentuk bantuan bukan keuangan, iaitu 50% daripada nilai anggaran kerugian keseluruhan, bagi membantu memulihkan projek kumpulan sasar serta mekanisasi dan otomasi ladang yang bertujuan meringankan beban kerugian yang ditanggung oleh akibat daripada bencana. Sikit lagi, 30 saat. Sementara dalam proses penilaian, KPKM melalui agensi seperti Lembaga Kemajuan Pertanian, MADA, KADA, juga menyalurkan bantuan segera yang melibatkan atur gerak skuad Ihsan Madani, lawatan turun padang dan khidmat nasihat kepada pesawah serta pengagihan bakul makanan. Bantuan dan inisiatif ini diharapkan dapat membantu para petani mengurangkan beban yang ditanggung akibat bencana, dan KPKM akan terus memastikan bantuan disalurkan secara adil, cekap dan telus. Memanglah tahun ini bencana berlaku banyak kali. Yang lama bantuan belum lagi selesai, datang pula bencana kedua. Jadi kita harap semua kita komited untuk mendapatkan maklumat dan menyalurkan bantuan sebaik mungkin kepada mereka yang ditimpa bencana. Terima kasih.
Terima kasih kepada Tuan Speaker, terima kasih kepada Menteri. Keberkesanan dalam soal pemberian bantuan kepada mangsa yang melibatkan para petani ini memerlukan kepada pemantauan yang telus supaya ia sampai kepada petani yang benar-benar terlibat. Persoalan saya, apakah indikator utama yang digunakan oleh kementerian untuk membuat satu pengukuran soal keberkesanan sampainya bantuan ini kepada mereka yang terbabit? Dan kemudiannya pula, adakah di sana ada saluran khas bagi petani menyampaikan maklum balas atau aduan? Mungkin ada soal kelewatan dan juga ketidakadilan dalam pemberian bantuan ini. Dan persoalan yang ada kaitan sikit, saya agak terkejut pada 10 hari bulan 12 baru ini, Timbalan Menteri Pertanian telah memaklumkan mengikut rekod ada 5.3